Well, this is going to be a stream that's quite different from the one yesterday. Um, I was incredibly bullish yesterday, as you could tell. I'd also drank a lot of caffeine, but I was very bullish because the meeting between Trump and Starmer had gone pretty much better than I or probably anyone could have expected. Uh, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Honestly, right? I got back in from work. I had a nap for maybe about an hour and a half. Um, I'd seen the footage of Zelensky heading into to meet Trump. Like he got out the car, shook his hand or whatever, and the two of them spoke to each other and he went inside. And then I went and had a nap, and I thought it hadn't. I mean, it was something that I was going to look at, the fact that that apparently they're going to be signing this deal with each other, but um, I hadn't given it a second thought so much um, that that meeting could end up the way that it did. Maybe I should have. I don't know. Maybe all the apprehension that I initially had about Starmer and Trump meeting each other and wondering whether it was going to go well or not. Maybe it was incredibly naive of me to uh, transfer the fact that Macron Trump went all right and Starmer Trump seemed to go pretty good, that Zelensky Trump would go fine, because as far as as far as everything we'd heard, oh, they've come to some sort of a deal about minerals or whatever. So clearly behind the scenes, they well sorted out their differences, makes light of the situation. But considering last week Trump was calling Zelensky a dictator, and then yesterday he's asked about calling him a dictator, and he goes, "Oh, did I say that really?" Made you think, all right, then Trump has flipped on a dime and decided that Zelensky's in his good books again. So now he's going to play nice. Um, it's it's crazy. I've watched I've just watched a 10-minute clip, which essentially sort of descended into a shouting match uh, between Zelensky, Trump, and JD Vance. Um, and Tapery in the chat says, need the others to join this discussion. It's literally unprecedented, pure chaos. The trouble is Tapery. Oh, hang on. The trouble is, I'm going out a little bit later this evening. I'm not going to have time to do a big long discussion about this with people, or to review all the footage with you guys tonight. And to be honest, that's probably, I don't know. I'm still in a slight sort of state of shock almost, as you can probably tell. So I'm not gonna have a chance to go through every single point of this, and I don't really think I want to at the moment either, because I need to assimilate the information of what's just happened. But I thought, at the very least, in the time that I had this evening, I'd just come kind of give you just my initial reaction and thoughts to it, because this is about 15 minutes ago that I've become aware of what's gone on here. Gary Williams in the chat says, I've really tried to be open-minded about Trump, even after January 6th. Today still shocked me. I detest him, Vance and Musk, for context. I detest him, Vance and Musk. For context, I'm not a lefty. I consider myself a classically liberal. I mean, it's hard to even know with that whole situation what part to even unpick from it to seize on, to say what you find so objectionable. It's the whole thing, but the absolute disrespect. The absolute disrespect. The fact that Trump was starting to put on his voices and do his hand gestures. I mean, Christ, man, this is Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, the country that's been invaded by Russia. A war of aggression, a clear act of aggression. They've been fighting for the last 3 years for the continued survival of their country, not to be taken over by Vladimir Putin. a murderous authoritarian dictator. Donald Trump comes into the White House. I'm going to sort out a deal. I'm going to do a deal. Oh, it never would have happened if I hadn't been in. I'm going to do a deal. We'll get a deal done in the first 24 hours. And then what's his time as presidency so far? What's his time as president so far shown? Well, he'll have plenty of bad words and things to say about Zelensky. Not so much Putin, really. When the negotiations started up, right over Zelensky's head, talking to Putin. I'll say quickly as an aside, I was watching analysis about Starmer and Trump meeting yesterday, and people were talking about when Theresa May and Trump had met and said how, as far as May and her team were concerned, they thought that meeting had gone really, really well. And then, I think it was on the plane back from having met Trump, Trump announced the Muslim ban, the ban on Muslims from different countries or travel from Muslim countries or whatever it was. And that had totally blindsided them, that even though it had been something that was sort of out there in the ether, they hadn't thought he'd make such a big announcement immediately afterwards. So people within that analysis, they had sort of said, oh, so it's gone really well with Trump and Starmer today, but does that mean, does that mean that you won't suddenly get blindsided by something really soon afterwards? And I'd absorbed that information and I took it as going, well, yeah, of course we can't guarantee everything. You never know what's going to happen, especially with Donald Trump. But I could not have imagined. I could not have imagined Zelensky going to the White House, descending into a shouting match where Trump and JD Vance basically just dogpiled on top of him, and he's there trying to, I think with the patience of a saint, despite everything, we're still trying to sit there and explain to them the situation in reasonable terms. But how can you not respond in that kind of a situation with increasing frustration? I'll read a few more comments from you guys in the chat here. Joey says, hi from Joey, and hi from Mrs. Joey, Ginger Panda Gamer. Hello there, both of you. Nice to have you with me. Taper says, US foreign policy has been stupid for decades, full horseshoe. Frank says, today has shown that JD Vance might actually be worse president than Trump. Rodog says, I don't know if I should have laughed had it not been so serious. Taper, Zelensky has been kicked out of the White House. No press conference, which was scheduled after. He's going to London now. Well, you know what? He'll get a warmer reception in London. Absolutely. Absolute shit show. Gary Williams says, if Trump had been in Zelensky's position with tanks rolling up on DC, he would have been on the first flight out of there. Zelensky caught calling JD Vance a sucker biliad. Fucking bitch translation. That's interesting. Was that within the Oval Office or after he'd left? Rodog says Trump would do exactly what Assad would have done in Syria at the first whiff of revolution. And Charlie says, I'm not surprised he's left. No, so let's let and I think Trump had said something like, come back when you're ready for peace or whatever, because I think this from the 10-minute clip that I watched, at least, where they were it was tense at the beginning of that clip, but they weren't quite full on shouting. I don't know at what point it shifted. I'm gonna have to go and see the whole thing at some point soon, but it was, Trump trying, you don't want a ceasefire? Why don't you want a ceasefire? And Zelensky's trying to say, well, that I need security guarantees. I can't just, we can't just end it without guarantees in place, because otherwise Putin will come back for more. And he at one point tries to explain about sort of the history of the entire situation, the invasion of Crimea, the regions in the east, the fact that there had already been agreements made along those lines, which Putin had violated, and obviously then the full-scale invasion in 2022. What does this mean at the moment then? What does this mean at the moment? Well, I mean, given this, if we thought Trump calling Zelensky a dictator on social media last week was one level of things, and at that point in time, that shocked and surprised everyone, and was enough to start forcing European leaders into action and getting together and discussing common defence and all kinds of other stuff there. Yeah, Taperi says, ironically, Starmer's best day, according to establishment centrists, has been pissed away. Starmer got to bask in the sun for 24 hours. Those were the best 24 hours of Starmer's premiership so far. It was all good news, all positive vibes. Everyone thought he'd done a really good job, and we felt good. And maybe preemptively, we tried to breathe a little sigh of relief and thought, whew, maybe this situation isn't quite as bad as we thought it was going to be. Well, I think what's going to happen with Starmer now? Because all that goodwill that he's built up with Donald Trump, surely anything even resembling a sort of a solid or forceful backing of Zelensky after all this is going to may erode some of that. What's the reaction from Europe going to be? Because I mean, at this point in time, I'm obviously taking it that they've not signed the minerals deal, unless they did that like for the cameras immediately before I saw the clip. I'm assuming they've not signed the minerals deal, and that being the case, I don't think that's going to happen now. And likewise, whatever these negotiations now between Trump and Putin are, is Ukraine going to agree to any of that? Are they going to sign up to any of that? Absolutely not. No. Not in this situation either. We are, I think, looking potentially at the worst case scenario of what has been building out of the past month or so, which is not only do we not arrive at some kind of a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine due to whatever Trump would attempt to negotiate. So not only are we it seems unlikely to get to a ceasefire at the moment, but also, in all likelihood, the US could well completely withdraw their backing for Ukraine, military aid, support, anything else that they'd still been doing for Ukraine at this point. That could all go by the wayside, and then I assume it's going to be an incredibly mad scramble amongst us and the other Europeans to try and fill in the gap there. And there are serious questions whether we're going to be able to do that or not, to be totally frank with you. Yeah, fucking hell, guys. Fucking hell. I feel a bit fucking naive just how chipper I was yesterday about the Starmer Trump meeting. For a very brief amount of time, I allowed myself to forget what a fucking vile human being that Donald Trump is, and JD Vance and his old fucking MAGA movement. It's quite sickening. Quite sickening, this whole situation. Yeah. Fucking sucks. Fucking sucks. I really, really feel for the Ukrainians here. It's not their fault that the Americans have elected a fucking jackass who's going to sell them down the river, who's got no decent stake in values of any sort, really, or in doing the right thing. No, it's all self-interest. It's all for praise for Donald Trump. Gary Williams says, remember when JD called Trump Hitler? JD doesn't remember. No. Well, neither did Starmer or Lammy, did they? With all the things that they'd ended up saying. This is it, isn't it? At one point in time, a lot of people called Trump out for the sort of person that he was, and then against seemingly all of the odds for a person that rightly should have ended up in fucking prison after his first term, he ascends to the presidency again, and everyone surveying the ground there goes, "Ah, shit. All right then. Well, we can't help the fact that he's president again now." JD Vance, different story, vice president, but I'm talking about Starmer Lammy. They see that they might have to work with him, and they go, "Oh shit! Well, we're gonna have to row back on all this stuff now. We're gonna have to play nicey nice, rebuild relationships, suck up to them, pretend that we're their best friend, be incredibly deferential." Oh, what a win for Starmer yesterday that he managed to sneak in a little. Oh, by the way, Trump, your figures about whether or not we're loaning or granting the Ukrainians money aren't quite correct. Wow, that's that's the reality that we're living in now. That you can't even really openly dispute the crap that Donald Trump says. You've got to be incredibly careful with your words if you're a leader or a government in another country, because you know that on a whim potentially, Trump could turn against you in such a vicious way, whether it's suggesting maybe that he wouldn't come to support a country in NATO, or that he's going to suddenly slap a huge number of tariffs on your country, and that's totally conceivable to me. By the way, say hypothetical, say Keir Starmer comes out behind a podium after what's happened today, after meeting with Zelensky, and decides to do a bit of an about turn and sort of says, "Oh, and departs from the previous line of trying to play nicey and kind of goes, look, I've done my best to be diplomatic here, but what happened in the Oval Office, I need to make absolutely clear, we stand with Zelensky here. We think that it's absolute, basically, if he started speaking some elements of the actual truth that the rest of us perceive, if you were to peel back that layer of deference ever so slightly, and condemn what had gone on, we'd be slapped with tariffs. We'd be slapped with tariffs, I'm sure of it. No doubt about it. With a stroke of a pen, Donald Trump would go, "Oh, no, I've decided it's a terrible deal what they're doing over in Britain. It's a terrible deal. They're screwing over America. The Brits don't have free speech. He's been very disrespectful to me, very nasty to me. I feel completely justified in putting these tariffs in place." That'd be the sort of thing that he'd do. If we even started to try and speak a fraction of the truth about Donald Trump. And that's the person that's the leader of the most powerful country in the world right now, who's warmer with the likes of Vladimir Putin than Zelensky. It's shocking, and it's a hell of a thing to have to try and climatize to. Because there's always, I've been on alert since the beginning of the year with all kinds of things relating to Donald Trump, whether it's Elon Musk throwing up fucking fascist salutes, or whether it's Donald making threats about Canada or Greenland or wherever else, or indeed a lack of support for Zelensky or cozying up to Putin. But there's always been a sense within me that's wanted to return to a feeling of going, "Oh, it's okay, it's fine. Maybe it's all part of a strategy. Maybe it's all part of his bluster. Maybe maybe things will come good in the end. Maybe he's got people around him. Maybe behind closed doors, Keir Starmer and Trump having a conversation might end up setting him right." I'm not trying to tell you that those are all things that I believed, because I wouldn't have been concerned about Trump to the level that I have been if that hadn't been the case. But there are at least certain things that you do psychologically attempt to balance things with, or to fall back on ever so slightly, despite the despite everything that's staring you in the face of all this kind of stuff. Um, Podge in the chat says we don't have free speech. The police and courts act ensures that Labour promised to repeal it. They didn't. Podge, I need to be frank with you here on this one, okay? I've got issues with the way some of our laws operate and the way in which some speech in this country is policed. Absolutely, okay? Don't get that wrong for a moment. But to say something like we don't have free speech is a very damaging thing. And that seeds an awful lot of ground to these very dangerous and nasty people on the right now who are attempting to portray the UK and wider Europe as a place that does not have free speech. We don't have free speech in the same way that America has free speech enshrined in their constitution. We have balances of individual liberties to speak your mind, but also other laws and considerations about doing harm to others or inciting violence or whatever else. There are some ways in which we in which our speech is freer than comparable European countries. There are some ways in which our speech is more restricted than comparable European countries. And you've got to look at a whole raft of issues. You've got to look at whether we're talking about religious speech or blasphemy laws, or whether people are going to be offended about something or not. For example, there are things in Germany, because of their history with the Nazis, that the Germans will simply not allow you to do or say compared to other countries like this. You can't deny the Holocaust in Germany. You'll get put in prison for that. I think in France, possibly, or one of those countries, you can't deny the Armenian genocide because you'll get thrown in prison for that. And of course, here, part of that narrative is to go, oh, people get put in prison for hurty tweets, for saying mean things on the internet. Now, let's be clear, because I think there's an awful lot of attempts to muddy the water of this kind of stuff. There are people who have been put in prison for incitement to violence, for encouraging people to go out and to riot. And in those riots, we saw people attempting to set fire to buildings with people inside of them. People cheering that on and saying that it should happen. Back when I was, in the absolute depths of my, free speech absolutism as my outlook many years ago, one of the few exceptions that even I said was incitement to violence. You don't incite people to go and commit acts of violence. A lot of this pushback within parts of the right in this country saying that we don't have free speech. Oh, you'll get arrested for saying mean things online. The strength of that, and in a way, the things that some of these people are subtly trying to reference to are things like inciting violence in the riots. Now, let me also be clear. I do think personally that there are parts of our rules pertaining to online communications and free speech that do go too far in a restrictive way, that have too loose or lower threshold for offending somebody or things like that. And I don't like that. I don't like that. I would like that to change. But the fundamentals of free speech are that I can criticize the government. I can criticize my government. I can say I think Keir Starmer is doing a terrible job. I can say I think Keir Starmer is a dickhead. I can say I think that the entire government are immoral bastards who are in it for themselves, looking to line their own pockets, and they don't care about the regular people in the country. I'm not necessarily saying that's my view, but point being, I'm trying to go for an example here. I can say that I don't think the king should be the king, that our head of state should be got rid of, and we should be a republic instead. I can say that. There are an awful, awful, awful lot of countries around the world where you can't say things like that, where to speak out against the leadership of your country in that kind of a way will put you in prison or get you killed. So, free speech, okay? Are there things that are imperfect about free speech in this country? I would agree with that. Yeah, sure. There are definitely things I'd like to see changed, or at least an approach to how much weight we put on certain things like offending other people. Fair enough. But I reject wholeheartedly this lie that some people are trying to put about that we don't have free speech, because we do. It might not be the exact form or version of free speech that you would prefer, sure, but it's a real disservice to our country and reality to say that we don't have free speech. Because you only need to look at a country that genuinely does not have free speech in any meaningful capacity to see the differences there. Now, Podge, I will say you set me off there. That again, that I think this is twice in like a week or two that I've gone on a little rant based off of something that you've said. But to be clear, I'm not having a pop at you there. But I think that was a topic that had been brewing on my mind for a little while, and with everything that's going on at the moment, this has been one of those streams that I felt like, dishing out some hard truths about things just a little bit. I'll read a few more comments. Sky's Echo 7 says, read US free speech exemptions, not in fact so different to the UK. Taper E says, we have free speech, we don't have effective speech. Pakistan right now is very draconian, where you're not allowed to even criticize the army currently, or you'll get jailed and your family. Podge says, I think genuinely he doesn't like Zelensky personally. It's not actually against the people of Ukraine. He's still salty about his first impeachment. Rodog says, in Moscow, you'll get arrested for holding up a blank piece of paper. Cameron says, do you have a license to criticize the government? Gary Williams, I don't like Starmer or Labour at all, but the right acting like he's some kind of oppressive communist is nuts. Yeah. There's something very concerning, more than concerning, worrying. There's something very worrying and ugly happening with the right at the moment. And I really hope that the more sensible heads prevail. Because what I really don't want to see happen is for our right in this country to turn into a British version of Trump's MAGA. And, I'm not saying Kemi Badenoch is necessarily quite there, but she is willing to exist within a wider orbit of some of these ideas and statements and rhetoric. And then maybe a bit further into that orbit, you've got the Farages, I don't need to explain Farage, you'll know Farage. So they even both of them may not be the most extreme examples of what we have going on in the right moment. Liz Truss. Liz Truss is probably a good one to point out. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss. Former Prime Minister. An ex-PM going overseas to tell the Americans just how awful and dystopian it is here and how we need to be rescued with something resembling Elon Musk or Donald Trump. Eyes open, people. Eyes open. Because this stuff, I would love to be able to say that this stuff has peaked. I really would. To say that, you know, however far all of this was going to go, it had got there, and we're on our way back down the hill on the other side. But that's not the situation. And just because, you know, Starmer and Labour are in government right now with a very big majority, that's a quirk of first past the post, really. There wasn't a level of support for Starmer resembling the size of the majority that they've ended up getting. And if you look at the polls at the moment, who's polling number one? In some pollsters, Nigel Farage's Reform. Yeah, no, this is an ongoing thing. And maybe it's still a strengthening thing as well. And that is really worrying to me. It really is. The right are having a very weird, dodgy moment right now, where they're starting to lean in to some strange extremes. I don't know what more I can say about that at the moment, really, other than to point it out. Breaking. NBC reports that the US State Department is ending support for Ukraine's power grid restoration. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Kemi Badnoch and saving Western civilization. It's always about the fucking fate of Western civilization, isn't it? And it's the enemy within, isn't it? It's the woke Marxist left liberals or whatever, isn't it? Woke is on the back foot. Woke is on the decline. You know. I've not liked things coming out of sort of like the liberal left over the past decade or so. I think that in some places they have gone way too far in trying to shout down people who disagree with the particular progressive messages that they were pushing, or to overly quickly want to try and label a person as being a racist or a transphobic or what have you. And I've been in parts a bit pleased and a bit relieved to see that some of that stuff is beginning to fall away, and some of those voices on the left either being sidelined or even, I don't know. I think Ash Sakar of Novara Media recently has come out and sort of said, "Oh yeah, maybe I'm reconsidering some of these viewpoints on how we push some of our ideas or whatever." But the problem is that this very radical part of the right now, I don't know when they're going to stop. I think that it's fair enough that you can identify a problem and say, okay, we don't like some of this stuff that the left has been doing. We want to see that reversed. Fair enough. But it's the way it's framed as well. It's this insidious inside threat to the whole of Western civilization that needs to be wiped out, and it's still a threat, and we've got to continue pushing back against it. And you know, the people trying to tell you that I mean, fucking JD Vance, you know, there's plenty of others, but people trying to tell you that, I don't know, the left-wing liberals or even woke is a bigger threat to Western civilization than the likes of Putin. The ability for Russian talking points and propaganda to permeate through the West and assist in driving people into the arms of the extremes. And I know that because I've been there. I've been one of those people whose default position on things was an anti-Western slant, and I just so happened to agree with what the Russian aligned propagandist talking points would be on particular things. And that led me down very strange paths where I was searching for false flags and denying very obvious things in front of me and being an apologist for some very awful things. But I felt at the time it was the correct interpretation of things. And it was a very very humbling moment when I realized just how wrong I'd been about some of that stuff. And don't get me wrong, I was never pro-Russia or anything like that. But there was just enough of me. There were just enough hooks that some of those narratives had managed to get in me that my predisposition to skepticism towards the West from my sort of younger left-wing, the Iraq War, how terrible, that kind of outlook, that I was very susceptible to that kind of stuff. So I'm really under no illusions how powerful that kind of propaganda can be. And I definitely think that kind of stuff, in addition with where we seem to be headed with some parts of our politics right now, I think that's a greater threat to Western civilization as we've known it for a long time than, fucking rainbow flags. What changed my mind, said Podge. What changed my mind is that I was searching for evidence of two things at the same time. I was searching for evidence that that Skripal. This was the thing, right? Okay, I didn't even know what it was that I thought had happened with like the Skripal poisoning, right? I don't even know what I thought had happened. All I knew is that immediately, instinctively, as soon as I heard about this, my immediate assumption was, oh, they must be trying to make stuff up and frame the Russians for this to continue to push their own foreign policy agenda against Russia because they don't like the Russians. Something in that kind of a shape. But I didn't even know what I thought. I didn't know if I thought it was a false flag attack and there had been no poisoning. I don't know if I thought that something had gone on, but it'd been a different state actor that had done it. I didn't know what I thought. All I knew is that immediately I was not going to accept what was being put in front of me as saying, yes, the Russians are doing this. I was saying silly things like, oh, why would they do something like that when they're hosting the World Cup? As if that's any kind of a fucking good argument for it. And it was through a process of I was really in a space for a couple of weeks where I was trawling, trying to find stuff to evidence to support whatever counter narrative there was to the official version of things. And I think about a particular moment it's tricky because I think in part it was a gradual realization over a few days, but I think there was at one point I was looking at I think they'd found CCTV footage of the people alleged to have done the poisoning. And they had like a screenshot of it, of the CCTV of them walking in an airport or something. And there was a screenshot of that on Twitter. and I looked at it and I went, oh, okay, right, okay, so they've got an image here of the guys who are supposed to have done it, and that in itself at least said to me, right, well, they're these are the guys that they're saying did it, as opposed to the theory that any other counter theory that would involve it. Again, I don't know, because I don't know what I thought. All I thought was some Russian sympathetic idea behind it. But I was looking at that, and I was taking that as the information that was put in front of me. Okay, then these are the guys that are accused of doing it, not knowing anything else, or whatever other narrative my brain was kind of trying to construct at the time. But I looked in the comments underneath that image, and I saw a bunch of people saying shit like, "Oh, look at the date and the time on the numbers in the corner of this image. These pixels look slightly out of line, which says that the image has possibly been doctored," or something like that. And I just looked at it and thought, oh well, no, it's fucking CCTV footage. These aren't the most fancy fucking HD cameras in the world here. Now I can point to that and say that that was part of it, and that was definitely an important moment. But there have been other stuff going on as well. There was me trying to trying to prove false flag attacks in the Middle East at the time as well. I'd had a long-time viewer of this channel who'd been in quite long, in-depth conversations with me about that, trying to convince me otherwise. Quite a lot of people surrounding me at the time actually were going out of their way to try and talk me around from some of the extreme positions that I had. So there was all of that going on as well. But yeah, having looked at that, having just that just for a moment, that little spark went off in my head, and I thought, well, these people saying that the CCTV footage is fake are talking fucking nonsense. There's a perfectly plausible explanation for I don't know, a few pixels being slightly off or something like that. And then I've said this before in other videos, but it is very much the best way to frame it. It's like you've got a jumper, and your first little thread of it just comes off, and you go, oh, that's interesting. And then you start pulling on it, and you start going, okay, well, what if I don't accept some of the other premises that I've been thinking? What if I start to question some of the other things I've been saying with that same kind of skeptical eye? And very, very quickly, whole house of cards comes down, and I realized just how nutty some of the things that I'd been saying were. And my worldview didn't change immediately. That's been a continuing process over the years, but certainly that was a very, very poignant moment for me in my relationship with narratives around Russia. And then obviously a few years later, Russia did a full-on invasion of Ukraine, which, set me even harder than I had been at that point as well. So that's one way of explaining it there. But the point, bringing it back to the main point, I suppose. What I'm trying to say is that there are damaging narratives out there. There's damaging propaganda, and sometimes some of these things that hook people in can have elements of truth sprinkled in there. But the larger way that it's framed or all put together is false and just not reflecting reality whatsoever. And the reason that I'm so concerned is because, I don't think that I'm a stupid person. I don't think that I'm a person that lacks critical thinking. I can look at information, I can come to conclusions, I can make an argument, I can do all those kinds of things. I think I'm pretty switched on, pretty politically engaged, all the rest of it. And yet, despite all of those things, for a number of years, I was still able to be embedded within a certain view with the blinkers totally on. And I did end up coming out of it, but I wonder how inevitable that was. I really do. I sometimes question whether if I'd been looking at different things on a different day and I'd never had that particular moment, whether it would have taken me far, far longer to come out of it, or whether I'd still be embedded within it now. And that really does make me think about the challenge we face in dealing with the fact that there are ever increasing numbers of people who are buying into other narratives with equally as damaging effect. Because if only it was so simple as to say to someone, "Hey, you're not actually right about this. Look, here's some evidence for what's actually going on." If only it was as simple as that, right? But it's not, because people have already, yeah, you've already got this whole fortress of thinking around you where you're going, oh no, but I don't trust that source because that source is the mainstream media, and the mainstream media have lied about this, that, or the other before, and politicians are saying that, but politicians lie about this, that, and the other as well, and all sorts. It would take me far too long to really dive into all that stuff here. I need to go quite soon. But the point being, if only it was just as simple as saying to someone, "Hey, look at this information here. This is what's going on." But it's not, because the thing with people who buy into, grandiose conspiracy theory narratives or other forms of propaganda is that it's self-reinforcing. It's self-reinforcing. As long as there are enough people that you can see who believe similar things to you and are putting that information around as well, that there will always be an explanation offered to counteract actual facts that have been presented to you. And if you're predisposed to already believing what you believe, you're much more inclined to continue to believe what you believe and to come up with an alternative version of what it is that you've seen. Skyco7 says most information has a bias. That's why it's important to have an open mind and a variety of sources. Yes, absolutely, Skyco7. And again, what worries me is even during that time, I considered myself to be a person that looked at all kinds of different sources. I'd read articles from different newspapers or online services. I'd talk to people from different wings of politics, all of that kind of stuff, with the best intentions in that area. And yet I was still able to be woefully wrong about some very obvious things for quite a while, despite all of that. But there we are. Claire King says, Swiss, I think everyone goes through a crazy right-wing period. I was once an Alex Jones fan. I will say, though, worth saying, this isn't just on the right. I'm really concerned about the right at the moment, but in the context of the stuff that I was talking about and what I believed regarding Russia a few years ago, there was plenty of prevalence of that on the left as well. That is worth noting. That despite the what people would deem as the very obvious differences between the right and the left, because of other parts of your ideology or outlook being that you're left wing or right wing, maybe if you're very left wing, you think that the United States is imperialist and it's throwing it to. I mean, Christ, if you thought that before, what do you think about the United States now? But that it throws its weight around, and the CIA has been involved in all this different stuff, and you think about the history of slavery and maybe stuff along those kinds of lines. Then you go, maybe we don't think the West is so good. But then maybe if you're on the right wing, you think that I don't like all this progressive, woke, liberal crap. I look at countries with the strong men and conservative values and that kind of stuff, and I think we should much more resemble them than what we've got here because everyone's gone really soft. And totally different kind of worldviews, But the thing that they could both have in common is that if old Russia over there can sort of weave a little bit of a narrative of their own and go, hey leftists, how would you like to blame America for the fact that we've invaded Ukraine? And then on the other hand, you go, hey, right wingers, isn't Putin a strong man? Wouldn't you like to have someone a bit more like Putin and his values over here instead of all that woke liberal nonsense you see, or whatever, you know. And I'm obviously vastly oversimplifying it, but that's the way that kind of thing can appeal to all kinds of different people. But guys, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go because I've streamed for quite a while here, and I've got stuff to do. I think I've lost the comment here. I think someone a short while earlier had said something like Swiss. It might be an idea to take a break for tonight or something like that. I can't find the comment, but one of you guys said that. I just want to let you know, as you know, sometimes I get over involved in things, and if I'm too hyper focused on politics, it's not very good for my mental health. What I will say though is that I feel that despite the sort of shock to my system today, kind of seeing what's gone on with the USA and Ukraine, broadly speaking, I feel that I've got a clearer mind and a clearer head about things now than I have done in the past. And at least I'm at least more comfortable in saying about where I feel I've been wrong in the past, or even where I feel ignorant about things currently. More comfortable, you know. We're all flawed. We've all got blinders and blinkers on. There's always going to be things that I'm not seeing, or that I'm not thinking about that I should be, or whatever else. I've just got to accept that, you know. But we do our best, don't we? We do our best to make sense of the world around us and to try and find out what we think to be right, and to try and keep ourselves in check for what our own biases are. And it's an impossible thing to do in totality, of course. But accepting that is a good step along the way anyway. But no, don't worry about me. I've got nice plans for this evening. I'm going to have a nice evening doing fun stuff. So I'm not going to be sitting here and stewing about fucking geopolitics and propaganda and the rise of the extreme right or any of that stuff. I've got nice things to be occupying myself with. Don't worry. But I did feel, I think I did feel a need to vent a little bit here. If anything, actually, maybe it's been a bit therapeutic, getting some stuff out there rather than just thinking about it in my head. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap up, guys. Obviously, what's going on at the moment. It's all unfolding right now. It's very unpredictable. It's going to be a very busy few days, few weeks. God knows where it's going. I will try to keep abreast of it. I will try to pop in and chat to you guys about it as well. But I will pace myself with it as well. It's a marathon. It's the world we live in right now. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Anyway, folks, look after yourselves. Be good to one another. Drop the stream a like. I'll catch you all later on. Ta-ta.